Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. They had never crossed paths before. 1. Darius Blake had long since slept in the shadows of the sidewalks, almost invisible to the world. His face, marked by hardship, his worn clothes, and his weary gait blended him into the urban setting like an unheard whisper. Every day, he faced the cold, the solitude, and the icy indifference of passers-by. He had become a ghost, lost in the immense machine of San Francisco. The other, Ethan Cole, lived in a completely different world. Surrounded by assistants, drivers, and colleagues, he moved through glass-enclosed offices, luxurious meeting rooms, and the bright lights of skyscrapers. A feared and respected businessman, sometimes even dreaded, he embodied power and success, a familiar face in the most exclusive circles. His life was punctuated by contracts, figures, and decisions that could change the face of entire neighborhoods. Yet, that morning, their destinies were about to collide head-on a simple park bench. Darius Blake, 54 ANS, had been living in poverty for 5 long years. Once a cybersecurity engineer, he had risen through the ranks with rigor and passion, dreaming of building a secure future for himself and his wife. But fate had taken a cruel course. His wife, Claire, had been taken in a few months by an aggressive cancer. The pain of this loss had shattered his balance. The company he worked for was going through a crisis, and Darius, with a heavy heart and a distracted mind, was laid off soon after. The bills had piled up. He had tried to hold on, to fight, but without a job and without support, the spiral had closed. The family home had been repossessed by the bank. A final goodbye, a forced move, then the street. The cold, the rain, the hunger, the fear. A brutal fall, one that could have broken any man. But not Darius. Even reduced to begging, to collecting bottles for a few cents, he kept a part of himself intact. His mind remained sharp, attentive, methodical, like a scientist scrutinizing every detail. He observed the world around him, noting in his mind every movement, every face, every behavior. He had retained that old habit from his past, analyzing, dissecting, noticing what no one bothered to see. On the street, everything became data, a clue, a silent story waiting to be understood. Every morning, like a ritual, he would settle down at the Franklin Square Park, at the corner of Bryant Street. This park, although modest, was a haven of peace in the heart of the bustling city. A square of greenery, lined with century-old trees and small paths, where workers took a break, where children played, where sometimes lovers met. Darius sat on a worn bench near a fountain whose gentle murmur soothed his tormented thoughts. He watched passers-by, observing them as one watches the moving waves of an ocean. He read the newspapers, some left behind, especially those containing economic and political articles, which he read with an expert eye, capable of understanding the hidden issues. This park had become his refuge, a place where he could reflect in silence, far from the shouts of the street. But this morning, the atmosphere was different. An invisible tension hung in the air, an omen he felt deep in his bones. It was this bench, the one he would sit on, that held a dangerous secret. That Tuesday, something was wrong. The sun peeked tentatively through a sky still veiled in gray clouds. The air was filled with a strange heaviness, as if the city were holding its breath. This Tuesday morning, in the usual calm of Franklin Square Park, one detail broke the routine. A shiver of alarm ran down Darius Blake's spine. For weeks, he had developed a kind of instinct, an almost paranoid vigilance, fueled by his experience on the streets and his background as an engineer. Today, that instinct was screaming at him that something was wrong. He had noticed 2 men in black suits, impeccably dressed, but exuding an icy coldness and calculated discretion. Their gait was anything but natural, no lightness or familiarity with the park, but a professional, almost mechanical determination. They were neither joggers, nor tourists, nor regulars in the neighborhood. No, they were there on a specific mission. The 2 men lingered near a wooden bench, the one Darius often sat on. Their behavior was furtive, cautious. One of them, after scanning the surroundings warily, had gently slipped something under the seat of the bench. A small metallic object, almost invisible to the naked eye, but with a shape and texture that betrayed its strangeness. They then walked away, without a backward glance, merging into the stream of passers-by with calculated ease, as if they were shadows in the light. Puzzled, Darius stood still for a moment, his heart beating faster. His engineer's mind had kicked in. He knew enough about technical devices to sense that this wasn't just a forgotten package or a forgotten bottle. He approached slowly, silent as a cat, trying not to attract attention. Under the bench, he delicately lifted the object, feeling the cold, smooth metal beneath his fingers. A small box, connected by a black cable to a metal plate fixed to the wood of the seat. Everything matched the pressure trigger patterns he had studied during his work. A cold shiver ran down his spine. It was a bomb. His mind raced, a trap. An attack, no doubt. But who was it for? Had he, a homeless man, been the target? Or someone else, someone more important? The weight of this discovery crushed his shoulders. The silence of the park suddenly seemed deafening, charged with an invisible threat. Darius knew he had to act quickly. He might have someone's life in his hands, or even several people's. Yet one question persisted, nagging. Why here, why now, and who had an interest in planting this bomb? At 11:47, fate knocked at the door. A black sedan with tinted windows slowed slowly to a stop at the edge of Franklin Square Park. The air suddenly felt heavier, time suspended, as if the city itself were holding its breath. The driver's side door opened, and a dapper man stepped out quickly, almost running. Ethan Cole, 47, wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit and a blue tie that clashed with his tanned complexion from years spent managing construction sites in the blazing sun. His solid gold watch caught the morning light as he glanced nervously at his wrist. He seemed hurried, preoccupied, his mind already preoccupied with the confidential meeting awaiting him in a discreet restaurant just across the street from the park. His brisk pace, punctuated by the sharp click of his shoes on the pavement, betrayed an underlying fatigue. Sleepless nights, tense negotiations, decisions with far-reaching consequences. Yet he was seeking a moment of respite, a pause, a breath of air amidst the tumult. Ethan approached the worn bench where Darius had sat for years, often invisible to those passing through the park. Today, he just wanted to sit there, relax for a moment, forget the overwhelming responsibilities. He placed his briefcase at his feet and prepared to sit down. "Sir, wait," a hoarse, hurried voice suddenly shouted, breaking the surrounding calm. Ethan froze, his hands still in the air. He turned around, surprised by the unexpected interruption. A man in dirty clothes, his face marked by life on the streets, was running towards him. His expression was panicked, almost desperate. "Get back. Don't touch it. This bench is booby-trapped." Instinctively, Ethan took a step back, frowning suspiciously. "What are you talking about, man? You're trying to scare me so you can rob me, is that it?" Darius's voice trembled, but his eyes shone with undeniable truth. He slowly raised his hands, to show he wasn't looking for confrontation. "I don't want anything from you. I'm saving your life. Look under the bench." Intrigued, but still wary, Ethan slowly crouched down. He followed Darius's gesture to the underside of the seat with his eyes. What he saw then froze him instantly. A small metal box, connected by a cable to an inconspicuous plate fixed under the wood of the bench. The object, neatly installed, was a pressure device, an explosion mechanism ready to trigger at the slightest weight. Ethan's heart was pounding. Fear, anger, and surprise mingled in a cocktail of intense emotions. He realized he had just escaped certain death, thanks to this man he had first ignored, judged, and then suddenly welcomed as a saving messenger. Ethan barely understood the extent of the danger when he pulled out his cell phone and dialed the emergency number. His voice was firm, almost breathless, as he explained the situation to the operators. "There's a bomb under a bench in Franklin Square Park. I just discovered it. Please send a bomb squad immediately." A few minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance, quickly approaching. Police arrived en masse, surrounding the park and ordering passers-by to move away quickly. The tense officers methodically evacuated every corner, creating a security perimeter. The apparent calm of the park transformed into a scene of organized chaos. Walkers, workers, and curious onlookers hurried away, some whispering, others calling to relay the news. Shortly after, the bomb disposal specialists took their places. A heavy silence fell as one of them slowly approached the bench. The group held their breath. The expert examined the machine carefully, his movements precise and methodical. Then, after a long moment, he nodded. "It's a real, operational explosive. The pressure mechanism would have triggered an instant deflagration." A murmur ran through the police crowd. Within hours, the news spread throughout the city, then the country. Local media rushed to the story, eager for information. CNN dispatched a team to cover the event live. NBC sent a reporter specializing in criminal investigations. New York Times devoted a double page to this improbable story. The titles were blooming everywhere. A homeless man prevents an attack on famous tycoon Ethan Cole. Everyday hero, the invisible man who saved a life. Darius Blake, the homeless man who foiled a bomb. Social media went wild. Hashtags like #InvisibleHero and #MercyDarius went viral. Videos of testimonies circulated, telling the story with emotion. But behind the spotlight, Darius himself was overwhelmed by the sudden attention. He had never wanted to be the center of anything. The fame, the applause, the interviews, it all seemed foreign, almost oppressive. He continued to sleep where he had always slept, in an alley not far from the park, under a worn blanket, with only an old plastic cup to collect a few coins as his luxury. He hadn't asked for any reward, any gift. He hadn't even tried to contact Ethan Cole, despite repeated calls from those around him. For Darius, there was nothing heroic about this. He had simply done what he believed was right, an act of survival and compassion in the midst of a world that was too often indifferent. A few days after the news exploded in the media, Ethan Cole made a decision he never would have imagined before, to return to Darius Blake, the man who had saved his life. He'd never really looked at a homeless person before. In his world, people like Darius were blurred silhouettes, presences to be avoided, a problem to be managed but never known. But this time was different. This time, he felt a deep unease, a weight on his conscience. They met in a small cafe a stone's throw from the park, a modest place where the atmosphere was calm, almost intimate. Ethan arrived with a slightly hesitant smile, a light briefcase in hand, while Darius, dressed in his usual worn clothes, sat down at the table opposite him, his gaze both wary and curious. "I owe you my life," Ethan murmured in a low, almost solemn voice, "and yet, I would never have met your gaze if you hadn't saved me." Darius looked down, emotion slowly seeping into his eyes. He wasn't used to this much attention, much less this much gratitude. "I only did what I had to do," he replied simply. Ethan then took out an envelope containing the keys to a hotel room reserved in his name, as well as an invitation to attend a vocational training program funded by his company. He wanted to give Darius a real chance to rebuild his life. But Darius shook his head gently. "I don't want favors. I want you to help those who are still out there, those no one ever looks at. Not just me." These words struck Ethan straight to the heart. He understood that this meeting was not an end, but a beginning. Touched and inspired, Ethan made a radical decision. He announced the creation of a non-profit foundation, the Blake Foundation for Street Heroes. The organization's mission was to fund shelters, provide job training, and create decent housing for deserving homeless people. But more importantly, it wanted to change society's perception of the invisible. Darius was invited to become its strategic advisor. Officially hired, he brought his lived experience, his in-depth knowledge of street mechanics, and above all, his humanity. Unofficially, he remained the soul of the project, the one who constantly reminded us that behind every silhouette in the street, there was a story, a dignity, a value. Little by little, Darius found his place in society again. But he never forgot where he came from. He walked the streets, spoke to the homeless, and carried their voices into the corridors of institutions. Ethan, meanwhile, discovered a new perspective on the world. This perspective, made possible by a man he had initially ignored, transformed his outlook on business and responsibility. Together, they demonstrated that true wealth was not measured in dollars, but in acts of solidarity and respect. A year later, at Franklin Square Park, the seasons have passed, but the memory remains. The sun of a mild morning pierces the foliage, gently caressing a very special bench. It is still there, in its original place, but transformed. It is no longer a simple piece of wood worn by the years, but a discreet and powerful monument, a silent reminder that greatness can arise where you least expect it. The bench has been reinforced with fine wood and wrought iron. The planks are now smooth and solid, as if the intention had been to erase the marks of the past while preserving its soul. It is bordered by a small flower bed, lavender, carnations, daffodils, planted by children from a nearby center during an educational workshop funded by the Blake Foundation. But the heart of the memorial is this bronze plaque, carefully polished, attached to the back of the bench. It reads, "To Darius Blake, for seeing what no one else saw. For saving a life without expecting recognition. The world owes you more than a glance." Hundreds of walkers pass by this plaque every week. Some stop to read it, others to photograph it. Teachers tell its story to their students. Strangers sometimes leave a flower, a letter, or a silent thought. And every morning, Darius Blake sits there again. But this time, he is no longer an invisible man, ignored, erased from the world. He is a living symbol, an urban legend with a human face. Those who meet him bow their heads in respect. Others come to talk to him, timidly. He listens, he smiles, sometimes he shares an anecdote, never about the bomb, but always about dignity, resilience, and the importance of seeing beyond appearances. He has traded fear for peace, oblivion for influence. His gaze remains the same, deep, attentive, but it is now lit by a quiet fire, that of the man who found his place in the world, not by climbing a ladder, but by remaining standing when everything was collapsing around him. Every year on April 17th, the day of the incident, a small ceremony is held in the park. No big cameras, no pompous speeches. Just voices, glances, shared silences. And Darius, at the center, ever humble. Because in this peaceful corner of San Francisco, a bench today tells much more than a story. He tells a story, universal truth. That not all heroes wear capes. That dignity can survive cold, hunger, oblivion. And that sometimes a single look is enough to restore light to a man.